Chapter 19. In conclusion, the need for a new enlightenment. The true value of a man is not determined by his possession, supposed or real, of truth, but rather by his sincere exertion to get to the truth. It is not possession of the truth, but rather the pursuit of truth by which he extends his powers, and in which his ever-growing perfectibility is to be found. Possession makes one passive, indolent, and proud. If God were to hold all truth concealed in his right hand, and in his left only the steady and diligent drive for truth, albeit with the proviso that I would always and forever err in the process, and to offer me the choice, I would, with all humility, take the left hand. Gotthold Lessing, Anti-Goethe, 1778. The Messiah is not coming, and he's not even going to call. Israeli hit tune in 2001. The great Lessing put it very mildly in the course of his exchange of polemics with the fundamentalist preacher Goethe, and his becoming modesty made it seem as if he had or could have a choice in the matter. In point of fact, we do not have the option of choosing absolute truth or faith. We only have the right to say of those who do claim to know the truth of revelation that they are deceiving themselves and attempting to deceive or to intimidate others. Of course, it is better and healthier for the mind to choose the path of skepticism and inquiry in any case, because only by continual exercise of these faculties can we hope to achieve anything. Whereas religions, wittily defined by Simon Blackburn in his study of Plato's Republic, are merely fossilized philosophies, or philosophy with the questions left out. To choose dogma and faith over doubt and experiment is to throw out the ripening vintage and to reach greedily for the Kool-Aid. Thomas Aquinas once wrote a document on the Trinity and, modestly regarding it as one of his more finely polished efforts, laid it on the altar at Notre Dame so that God himself could scrutinize the work and perhaps favor the angelic doctor with an opinion. Aquinas here committed the same mistake as those who made nuns in convents cover their baths with canvas during ablutions. It was felt that God's gaze would be deflected from the undraped female forms by such a modest device, but forgotten that he could supposedly see anything, anywhere, at any time, by virtue of his omniscience and omnipresence, and further forgotten that he could undoubtedly see through the walls and ceilings of the nunnery before being baffled by the canvas shield. One supposes that the nuns were actually being prevented from peering at their own bodies, or rather at one another's. However that may be, Aquinas later found that God had indeed given his treatise a good review, he being the only author ever to have claimed this distinction, and was discovered by awed monks and novices to be blissfully levitating around the interior of the cathedral. Rest assured that we have eyewitnesses for this event. On a certain day in the spring of 2006, President Ahmadinejad of Iran, accompanied by his cabinet, made a procession to the site of a well between the capital city of Tehran and the holy city of Qum. This is said to be the cistern where the 12th or occulted or hidden imam took refuge in the year 873, at the age of 5, never to be seen again until his long-awaited and beseeched reappearance will astonish and redeem the world. On arrival, Ahmadinejad took a scroll of paper and thrust it down the aperture, so as to update the occulted one on Iran's progress in thermonuclear fission and the enrichment of uranium. One might have thought that the imam could keep abreast of these developments wherever he was, but it had in some way to be the well that acted as his dead letterbox. One might add that President Ahmadinejad had recently returned from the United Nations, where he'd given a speech that was much covered on both radio and television, as well as viewed by a large live audience. On his return to Iran, however, he told his supporters that he had been suffused with a clear green light, green being the preferred colour of Islam, all throughout his remarks, and that the emanations of this divine light had kept everybody in the General Assembly quite silent and still. Private to him, as this phenomenon was, it appears to have been felt by him alone. He took it as a further sign of the imminent return of the 12th Imam, not to say a further endorsement of his ambition to see the Islamic Republic of Iran, sunk as it was in beggary and repression and stagnation and corruption, as nonetheless a nuclear power. But like Aquinas, he did not trust the 12th or hidden Imam to be able to scan a document, unless it was put, as it were, right in front of him. Having often watched Shia ceremonies and processions, I was not surprised to learn that they are partly borrowed in their form and liturgy from Catholicism. 12 Imams, one of them now in occultation and awaiting reappearance or reawakening. A frenzied cult of martyrdom, especially over the agonizing death of Hussein, who was forsaken and betrayed on the arid and bitter plains of Karbala. Processions of flagellants and self-mortifiers, awash in grief and guilt at the way in which their sacrificed leader had been abandoned. The masochistic Shia holiday of Ashura bears the strongest resemblances to the sort of Semana Santa or Holy Week, in which the cowls and crosses and hoods and torches are borne through the streets of Spain. Yet again it is demonstrated that monotheistic religion is a plagiarism of a plagiarism of a hearsay of a hearsay, of an illusion of an illusion. extending all the way back to a fabrication of a few non-events. Another way of putting this is to say that, as I write, a version of the Inquisition is about to lay hands on a nuclear weapon. Under the stultified rule of religion, the great and inventive and sophisticated civilization of Persia has been steadily losing its pulse. Its writers and artists and intellectuals are mainly in exile or stifled by censorship. Its women are chattel and sexual prey. Its young people are mostly half-educated and without employment. After a quarter century of theocracy, Iran still exports the very things it exported when the theocrats took over: pistachio nuts and rugs. Modernity and technology have passed it by, save for the one achievement of nuclearization. This puts the confrontation between faith and civilization on a whole new footing. Until relatively recently, those who adopted the clerical path had to pay a heavy price for it. Their societies would decay, their economies would contract, their best minds would go to waste or take themselves elsewhere, and they would consistently be outdone by societies that had learned to tame and sequester the religious impulse. A country like Afghanistan would simply rot. Bad enough as this was, it became worse on September 11th, 2001, when from Afghanistan the Holy Order was given to annex two famous achievements of modernism, the high-rise building and the jet aircraft, and use them for immolation and human sacrifice.
Well, we know about that.
The succeeding stage, very plainly announced in historical sermons, was to be the moment when apocalyptic nihilists coincided with Armageddon weaponry.
Again, that's tower.
Faith-based fanatics could not design anything as useful or beautiful as a skyscraper or a passenger aircraft, but continuing their long history of plagiarism, they could borrow and steal these things and use them as a negation.